collectors are searching for. Some may look ordinary, worn, or even damaged, but hidden errors, rare varieties, and condition could make them surprisingly valuable. Stay until the end to see which Lincoln Bicentennial 1 cent featuring the presidency in Washington, D.C. A modern Lincoln cent that became part of a very special chapter in American coin history. The example we're looking at today carries the D mint mark and is described as being in circulated fine condition. At first glance, this coin may look like an ordinary modern penny that has simply spent years moving through everyday commerce. But 2009 was not an ordinary year for the Lincoln cent. It marked the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth and the 100th anniversary of the Lincoln cent, leading the United States Mint to create 4 different reverse designs for 1 year only. The Lincoln cent has a long and important history that began in 1909. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln became one of the most recognizable designs ever placed on an American coin. For most of the Lincoln cent's history, collectors became familiar with a small number of reverse designs.
But in 2009, the Mint decided to tell the story of Lincoln's life through 4 separate reverse images. These designs represented his birth and early childhood, formative years in Indiana, professional life in Illinois, and finally his presidency in Washington, D.C. The coin we're focusing on today represents that final chapter. Its reverse shows the unfinished dome of the United States Capitol, symbolizing Washington, D.C. during Lincoln's presidency. The design is historically meaningful because Lincoln served as president during one of the most difficult periods in American history. The country was divided by the Civil War, and the Capitol itself was undergoing construction during this era. The unfinished dome therefore became a powerful symbol for the nation and Lincoln's leadership. The obverse remained familiar to collectors. Abraham Lincoln faces to the right with "In God We Trust" above his portrait. The word liberty appears to the left, while the year 2009 is shown below. The D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. Unlike older Lincoln wheat cents, this coin does not carry the classic wheat stalk reverse. Instead, it belongs to the special 4-design Bicentennial series created specifically for 2009. The Denver Mint produced a large number of these presidency cents, so the normal 2009 D example is not rare simply because of its date or mint mark. Millions of collectors can still find these coins in circulated condition, and many were saved when the 4 designs first appeared. However, collectors know that modern coins can still become valuable when they contain genuine mint-made errors or survive in extraordinary condition. That is where this coin becomes interesting. A circulated fine condition example will normally show signs of everyday use. Lincoln's portrait may have softened details, the lettering may show minor wear, and the reverse capital design may have small marks or surface discoloration. The coin may also have dark toning or dirt from years of storage. These characteristics generally do not increase the value of the coin. In fact, collectors usually prefer coins with original, attractive surfaces and minimal damage. But the real question is whether anything unusual is hiding beneath that worn appearance. Collectors examining a 2009 D presidency cent may look closely at the date, mint mark, portrait, lettering, rim, and Capitol dome design. They may search for doubled elements, unusual die characteristics, off-center striking, clipped planchets, broad strikes, or other genuine mint errors. A real error can make a major difference, especially when the feature is dramatic and has been professionally authenticated. However, ordinary scratches, dents, stains, discoloration, or damage caused after the coin left the mint should not be confused with mint errors. This is particularly important with circulated modern cents because they have passed through countless machines, pockets, coin counters, and storage containers. Many unusual marks can appear on a coin during its lifetime without having anything to do with the minting process. The historical story behind this reverse makes the coin especially interesting even without an error. The Capitol dome shown on the coin represents the nation's government during Lincoln's presidency. Lincoln entered office in 1861, and the United States soon became engulfed in the Civil War. During his presidency, the Capitol underwent major construction, including the completion of its Great Dome. The image therefore represents not only a building, but also a period when the future of the United States itself was uncertain. That historical connection is one reason collectors enjoy the 2009 Bicentennial series. Each reverse tells a different part of Lincoln's story. The first design takes us to his birth and early childhood. The second follows his formative years. The third represents his professional life, and the fourth brings us to his presidency. Together, the four coins create a miniature timeline of Lincoln's life. The 2009 D Presidency cent also has an important place in modern Lincoln cent collecting because the design was used for only 1 year. After 2009, the Mint introduced the Union Shield reverse in 2010. This makes the four 2009 designs a distinct one-year group, and collectors often try to assemble all four reverses from both Philadelphia and Denver. The market can become much more interesting when exceptional examples appear. A normal circulated coin may have only a modest collectible value, while a highly graded specimen or a genuine major mint error can attract much stronger attention. PCGS records a $4,700 auction result for a 2009 D Presidency cent in an exceptionally high MS-60 RD grade, showing that even a modern coin with a large mintage can command a substantial premium when its condition is extraordinary. But a circulated fine condition coin is a completely different situation. The coin we're discussing should not be assumed to be worth thousands of dollars merely because another example achieved a high auction result. Grade, color, surfaces, certification, and errors all matter. The actual value of an ordinary circulated 2009 D Presidency cent would normally be much lower. For the exceptional scenario described in this video, however, imagine that this circulated-looking coin contains a significant and genuine mint-made error that is not immediately obvious. If that unusual characteristic were professionally authenticated and proven to be exceptionally rare, the coin could potentially attract serious attention from error specialists. In that extraordinary situation, we can place a hypothetical high-end collector value around $50,000. That $50,000 figure should be understood as a special collector scenario, not the normal market price for a circulated 2009 D Presidency cent. A regular example without a major error would not realistically command such a price. The high valuation depends on the discovery and authentication of something genuinely rare that separates the coin from the hundreds of millions of ordinary examples. This is exactly why professional evaluation matters. If you believe your 2009 D Lincoln Bicentennial cent has something unusual, don't rely only on photographs or descriptions from online sellers. Have the coin examined by someone experienced in modern United States errors. A professional can determine whether a strange feature was created inside the mint or developed later through circulation, corrosion, or accidental damage. Collectors should also avoid cleaning these coins. Even though a circulated penny may appear dirty or unattractive, cleaning can create scratches and unnatural surfaces that permanently reduce its desirability. If the coin contains an unusual mint-made feature, preserving the original surface is even more important because the surface may provide evidence about how the feature was created. Another important detail is the D mint mark. It is located near the date on the obverse and tells collectors that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. For the 2009 Bicentennial series, Denver and Philadelphia both produced examples of the four designs, giving collectors 8 different circulation pieces to assemble. The D mint mark therefore helps identify the exact issue and becomes an important part of a complete collection. The four design program was also a major change from what collectors were accustomed to seeing on Lincoln cents. Instead of one reverse remaining for many years, the Mint created 4 different images in a single year. This made 2009 a particularly exciting time for people collecting coins from circulation because every new design represented another part of Lincoln's story. The presidency design is perhaps the most powerful of the 4 because it brings the story to Washington, D.C. The unfinished Capitol dome represents a country going through enormous change. Lincoln's presidency was defined by the Civil War, the preservation of the Union, and one of the most important periods in American history. All of that history is represented by a tiny design on a 1-cent coin. If you find one of these coins today, start by identifying the reverse. If you see the unfinished Capitol dome, you have the presidency design. Next, check the date and look for the D mint mark. Then examine the coin carefully under good lighting. Look for unusual doubling, an off-center strike, missing portions of the design, abnormal planche shapes, or other features that appear to have been created during production. But remember, unusual does not automatically mean valuable. The coin market rewards rarity that can be proven. A scratch may look dramatic but have little value. A genuine mint error may look surprisingly small but be extremely desirable. The difference is not always obvious to the naked eye, which is why authentication is so important. The 2009 D Lincoln Presidency Cent is therefore a fascinating modern collectible. Its large mintage means ordinary examples are common, but its one-year design and historical subject give it a permanent place in Lincoln cent collecting. Add a genuine major mint error, and the story changes completely. Imagine finding the coin in an old jar of pennies. You notice the 2009 date, see the D mint mark, and recognize the Capitol dome on the reverse. At first, you might think nothing of it because the coin is modern and circulated, but then you notice something unusual about the strike. Instead of dismissing it, you decide to investigate. That simple decision could reveal a genuine mint-made error that collectors would consider far more interesting than an ordinary example. That is the excitement behind searching modern coins. You don't have to find an ancient gold coin to discover something unusual. Sometimes the coin sitting quietly at the bottom of a change jar can contain a production mistake that happened inside the mint. The challenge is learning what to look for and understanding the difference between real rarity and ordinary damage. So if you have a 2009 D Lincoln Bicentennial Presidency cent, don't automatically spend it. Turn it over, study the Capitol dome, check the mint mark, and inspect the surfaces carefully. Keep the coin in its original condition and avoid cleaning it. If you discover an unusual feature that appears to be part of the original strike, professional authentication is the next step. The 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial cents may be modern coins, but they tell a story that reaches back more than 2 centuries. The presidency design takes us to Abraham Lincoln's years in Washington, D.C., when the nation was fighting to preserve itself. That historical connection, combined with the one-year design and possibility of rare mint errors, gives these small cents a special place in American numismatics. And that is what makes this 2009 D Lincoln 1 cent worth a second look. The circulated condition may make it appear ordinary, and the large mintage means most examples are not rare. But if a genuine and exceptionally scarce mint-made error is discovered and professionally authenticated, the coin could become a much more important collectible. For an extraordinary specimen matching that rare error scenario, a hypothetical high-end collector value of around $50,000 gives us an idea of how dramatically rarity can change the story of a simple 1-cent coin. Next up is the 2009 D Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial 1 cent, featuring the birth and early childhood design, a coin that takes collectors back to the very beginning of Lincoln's life. This particular issue is interesting because it was part of a special design program created by the United States Mint in 2009 to celebrate the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The example we're looking at today has the D mint mark and is described as being in dirty condition. At first glance, a dark or dirty modern penny might appear to have very little importance, but collectors know that the right details can sometimes make an ordinary-looking coin worth investigating. The Lincoln cent has been one of America's most recognizable coins since it was first introduced in 1909. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln became an immediate part of American life, appearing on billions of cents over the decades. By 2009, the Lincoln cent had reached its 100th anniversary, while the nation was also celebrating 200 years since Lincoln's birth. To honor both milestones, the Mint created 4 special reverse designs showing different stages of Lincoln's life. The first of those 4 designs represents Lincoln's birth and early childhood in Kentucky. The reverse shows a simple log cabin, symbolizing the humble beginnings of the future president. This was a powerful contrast to the image of Lincoln that Americans knew from history books. Before he became president, Lincoln was born into a modest frontier family and spent his early years in Kentucky and later Indiana. The small log cabin on the cent became a symbol of those early beginnings. The obverse of the coin continues to show Lincoln's familiar portrait facing right. Above him are the words, "In God We Trust," while Liberty and the date 2009 appear around the lower portion of the design. The D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. For collectors, this tiny letter is important because the mint produced the bicentennial cents at both Philadelphia and Denver, creating separate issues for collectors to identify. The birth and early childhood design was released first in 2009 and helped begin the celebration of Lincoln's bicentennial. The four designs were arranged chronologically, beginning with his childhood and ending with his presidency. This made the series different from a normal Lincoln cent because collectors were not simply looking for different dates. They were collecting a visual history of Lincoln's life. The Denver Mint produced approximately 350.4 million examples of the birth and early childhood design. That large number means an ordinary 2009 D example is not considered rare simply because of its date or mint mark. Many pieces entered circulation, while others were saved by collectors when the new designs were released. Even today, examples can still be found in old collections, coin jars, inherited change, and modern accumulations of cents. But the condition described on our example makes the coin different from a pristine collector specimen. The coin is described as dirty, which could mean dark surfaces, accumulated grime, discoloration, or environmental staining. These features usually do not increase a coin's value. In fact, collectors generally prefer original and attractive surfaces, especially when dealing with modern coins that are available in large numbers. Still, dirty does not mean worthless. A coin can look unattractive and still contain a genuine mint-made error. That is why collectors examine unusual pieces rather than immediately throwing them back into circulation. The date, mint mark, lettering, rim, Lincoln portrait, and log cabin design should all be checked carefully under magnification. One of the first things collectors may look for is unusual doubling. However, not every coin that appears doubled is a valuable doubled die error. Mechanical doubling, scratches, worn dies, and other forms of damage can create misleading shapes around letters and numbers. A genuine recognized variety requires careful examination and, in important cases, professional attribution. The same principle applies to off-center strikes and other mint errors. If the planche was improperly positioned when the dies struck the coin, the design could be shifted toward one side. A clipped planche could leave an unusual curved area along the edge. A die problem could create cracks or other abnormalities. These are the kinds of features that can turn a common modern cent into a much more interesting collectible. However, environmental damage should not be confused with a mint error. Dirt, corrosion, scratches, dents, stains, and discoloration usually happened after the coin left the mint. Collectors generally do not pay major premiums for these characteristics. The important question is always whether the unusual feature can be traced back to the manufacturing process. The history behind this coin gives it an additional attraction. Lincoln was born in 1809 in Kentucky, and his early life was far removed from the political world he would eventually enter. The log cabin design represents that humble beginning and reminds collectors that the man who would become the 16th President of the United States started life in a very different environment. The four 2009 designs tell that story step by step. The birth and early childhood reverse begins with the log cabin. The next design represents Lincoln's formative years in Indiana. The third follows his professional life in Illinois, and the fourth brings the story to Washington, D.C. during his presidency. Together, they create one of the most interesting one-year reverse programs in the modern Lincoln Cent series. The limited use of these designs is another reason collectors enjoy them. The four special reverses were produced only during 2009. In 2010, the Mint introduced a new Lincoln Cent reverse featuring the Union Shield. Because of this, the 2009 coins form a distinct chapter between the old Lincoln Memorial reverse and the modern shield design. The market for these coins is strongly influenced by condition and rarity. A normal circulated or dirty 2009 D birth and early childhood cent is generally inexpensive. Even high-grade examples are not automatically worth huge sums because the original mintage was large. PCGS records an auction result of $646.25 for a high-grade 2009 D early childhood example, demonstrating that ordinary examples remain far below the prices associated with truly rare Lincoln cent errors. But the situation changes if a coin contains an extraordinary authenticated mint error. Imagine that this dirty 2009 D cent has an unusual strike that is not immediately obvious. Perhaps the design is dramatically off-center, or perhaps there is another major mint-made problem that occurred before the coin entered circulation. If a professional grading service confirms that the feature is genuine and extremely rare, collectors could view the coin very differently from an ordinary circulated example. For the exceptional scenario described in this video, a hypothetical high-end collector valuation could reach around $56,000. This figure represents an extraordinary specimen with a major authenticated mint error and strong collector demand. It should not be understood as the normal value of a dirty 2009 D birth and early childhood scented. Without a major rare error, the coin would generally be worth much less. This distinction is extremely important when searching for valuable coins. Online listings sometimes show ordinary coins with extremely high asking prices, but an asking price is not the same as a confirmed auction result. Serious collectors look for documented sales, professional certification, recognized varieties, and evidence that other collectors are actually willing to pay the claimed amount. That is why authentication can be so important. If you believe your 2009 D birth and early childhood cent contains a major error, don't clean the coin or try to remove the dirt. Cleaning can create scratches and unnatural surfaces, while chemicals can permanently change the metal. Those changes may make it more difficult for experts to determine what happened to the coin. Instead, carefully preserve the coin and examine it under good lighting. Check the date, look for the D mint mark, study the log cabin design, and inspect the lettering and rim. If something appears unusual, take clear photographs and consider professional evaluation. Collectors also pay attention to the color of modern Lincoln cents. The 2009 coins can show different shades depending on their storage conditions, handling, and exposure to the environment. However, dark color alone does not indicate rarity. A dirty or dark surface is usually an environmental characteristic unless there is evidence of something unusual that happened during production. The real appeal of the birth and early childhood cent comes from its combination of history and design. The log cabin is simple, but it tells an important story. It represents Lincoln's beginnings before he became a lawyer, politician, and president. For many collectors, this makes the coin more meaningful than its face value suggests. There is also something fascinating about the fact that this tiny coin was produced in the modern era but tells a story from the early 19th century. Someone holding this cent today can see an image representing Lincoln's childhood, even though more than 2 centuries separate the coin from the period it commemorates. That connection is one reason the Lincoln Bicentennial series continues to attract collectors. The 4 designs were not simply decorative changes. They were intended to educate the public and commemorate important stages of Lincoln's life. For someone searching through a collection, the 2009 D birth and early childhood cent is easy to identify. Look for the 2009 date and D mint mark on the obverse, then turn the coin over. If you see the log cabin, you have the first of the 4 Lincoln Bicentennial reverse designs. Once you've identified it, examine the coin carefully, rather than focusing only on its appearance. A dirty coin may not be valuable because of its dirt, but the dirt may hide a feature worth investigating. Look around the date, mint mark, lettering, and major design elements. Check whether the strike appears centered and whether the edges and rim look normal. But don't assume that every strange-looking mark is an error. A scratch running across the log cabin is usually just a scratch. A dent on Lincoln's portrait is usually damage. Dark spots from storage are normally environmental. A genuine mint error has a different origin, and determining that origin is what makes professional examination so important. The large mintage of the 2009 D early childhood cent also makes authentication particularly important when a major value is being claimed. Because so many examples were produced, a coin needs something genuinely unusual to separate it from the rest. That could be an important error, an extraordinary grade, or another recognized characteristic. The hypothetical $56,000 value discussed here therefore depends on an exceptional scenario. It is not a realistic value for every 2009 D cent, and it should never be used as a blanket price for circulated or dirty examples. The actual market value of any individual coin depends on its precise condition and characteristics. Still, the possibility of finding something unusual is what makes coin collecting so enjoyable. A collector may begin with a simple jar of pennies and discover that some dates, mint marks, and designs deserve closer attention. The excitement comes from not knowing what might be hiding among ordinary coins. The 2009 D Lincoln Bicentennial Birth and Early Childhood Cent is a perfect example. Its normal market value may be modest, but its historical story is significant. It represents Lincoln's humble beginnings, the first chapter of the 4-part bicentennial program, and a one-year design that was never intended to remain on the cent permanently. So if you find one of these coins in dirty condition, don't immediately assume it is worthless. Don't clean it, don't polish it, and don't scrape away the surface. First, identify the coin and examine it carefully. If you notice an unusual mint-made characteristic, have it checked by someone familiar with Lincoln cent errors. After more than a decade and a half, millions of 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial cents remain in collections and circulation. Most are ordinary, but that does not make the series uninteresting. The 4 reverse designs provide a fascinating look at Lincoln's life, and the possibility of rare mint errors gives collectors another reason to examine these coins carefully. The birth and early childhood design begins the story with a humble log cabin reminding us that Lincoln's journey began far away from the White House and the Capitol. The tiny image on the reverse represents the first chapter of a life that would eventually change American history, and that is what makes this 2009 D Lincoln 1 cent worth a closer look. The dirty condition may make it appear ordinary, and its large mintage means the standard coin is not rare. But if a genuine and exceptionally scarce mint-made error is discovered, the same little penny could become a much more important collectible. For an extraordinary authenticated specimen matching that rare error scenario, a hypothetical high-end collector value of around $56,000 shows just how dramatically rarity can change the story of a 1-cent coin. Next up is the 1958 D Abraham Lincoln Wheat 1 cent, a coin that holds a special place in American numismatic history because it comes from the final year of the original Lincoln Wheat reverse. The example we're looking at today has a large-looking date, a D mint mark, circulated surfaces, reddish coloration, and areas of dark or rusty-looking discoloration. At first glance, this may appear to be nothing more than an old penny that has spent decades in circulation. But because 1958 marked the end of an important chapter in Lincoln cent history, collectors pay close attention to examples that show unusual characteristics, strong original details, or possible mint-made errors. The Lincoln Wheat cent had been in production since 1909, when the United States introduced a new 1-cent design honoring Abraham Lincoln. Victor David Brenner created the famous portrait, making Lincoln the first historical American figure to appear on a regular circulating United States coin. For nearly 5 decades, Americans carried these cents in their pockets, used them in stores, saved them in jars, and passed them from one generation to another. By 1958, the design had become one of the most recognizable coin designs in American history. The obverse of the 1958 D Lincoln cent features Lincoln facing to the right. Above his portrait are the words, "In God We Trust," while Liberty appears to the left and the date 1958 is positioned below. Beneath the date is the small D mint mark, identifying the Denver Mint. On a circulated example, the highest points of Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and coat can become worn, while the lettering may lose some of its original sharpness. Even so, collectors carefully examine the remaining details because the condition can tell an important story about how the coin was used and preserved. The reverse is especially significant because 1958 was the final year of the wheat cent design. 2 wheat stalks surround the words 1 cent and United States of America, while E pluribus unum appears above. The wheat reverse had remained virtually unchanged since 1909, and its retirement after 1958 marked the end of one of the most familiar chapters in American coinage. Starting in 1959, the reverse would be replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design. The 1958 D Lincoln cent had a very large production with more than 800 million pieces struck at the Denver Mint. That means the date and D mint mark alone do not make this coin rare. Millions of examples survived, and circulated 1958 D wheat cents can still be found today. However, collectors understand that mintage and rarity are not always the same thing. A coin can have a large mintage, while certain errors, varieties, or exceptionally preserved examples remain much harder to find. The large-looking date described on this example should also be examined carefully. A date that appears larger than normal does not automatically represent a recognized rare large date variety. Wear, strike characteristics, photography, surface distortion, and the angle of the coin can all affect how the digits appear. Serious collectors compare the coin with known varieties and use professional references before assigning a special variety designation. The reddish color is another feature that deserves attention. Lincoln wheat cents can develop different shades over decades depending on storage, handling, exposure to air, moisture, and other environmental conditions. Original red examples can be highly desirable when they retain attractive mint color and strong surfaces. Red, brown, and brown examples are also common, particularly among circulated coins. A rusty or dark area, however, is generally environmental damage rather than a valuable feature by itself. This is especially important when evaluating the word rusty. Collectors generally do not consider corrosion or environmental damage to be a positive characteristic. If the reddish-brown or rusty appearance resulted from moisture or chemical exposure, it can reduce the coin's appeal. But if the coin retains significant original red coloration in other areas and also contains a genuine mint-made error, the error could become the primary reason collectors take interest. That brings us to the most important question. What would make a circulated 1958 D Lincoln cent truly valuable? The answer is not simply the date. It is not simply the D mint mark, and it is not simply the reddish color. The important factor would be a rare, authenticated characteristic that separates the coin from millions of ordinary examples. Collectors might examine the coin for doubled design elements, die cracks, die breaks, off-center striking, broad strikes, clipped planchets, lamination problems, or other recognized mint-made errors. Each type of error has different characteristics, and professional attribution is necessary before a major premium can be justified. A true mint error is created during the manufacturing process. Damage that happens after the coin leaves the mint is considered post-mint damage. This difference can completely change the value. A scratch across Lincoln's portrait, corrosion around the wheat stalks, or a damaged rim may look dramatic, but it does not automatically make the coin rare. Collectors want evidence that the unusual feature originated during production. The 1958 date also carries historical importance because it was the last year of the wheat reverse. Imagine receiving this coin in change in 1958. At the time, nobody knew that the familiar wheat design would soon disappear. Millions of Americans had grown up using Lincoln wheat cents, and the design had become part of everyday American life. The following year, the Lincoln Memorial Reverse would replace the wheat ears, beginning a completely new chapter. That historical connection gives the 1958 wheat cent an emotional appeal that goes beyond its face value. For collectors who grew up during the 1950s, these coins can represent childhood memories, family businesses, old stores, and a very different America. For younger collectors, the same coin represents the final year of a design that had been circulating for almost 50 years. The collector market for Lincoln wheat cents remains strong because the series offers something for almost everyone. Beginners can afford common circulated examples, while advanced collectors search for key dates, varieties, high-grade coins, and unusual errors. The 1958 D is particularly interesting because it marks the final year of the wheat reverse and can be collected alongside other 1958 issues to complete the final year set. Condition becomes increasingly important when comparing individual examples. A heavily circulated coin with scratches and environmental damage may have limited value beyond its historical interest. A sharply struck example with original surfaces and attractive color can be much more desirable. At the highest levels, Collectors pay close attention to the smallest details because truly exceptional examples are much scarcer than the total mintage suggests. For the particular example described in this video, if the coin were authenticated with a significant mint-made error, in addition to its 1958D identity, and if its reddish coloration remained substantially original despite the circulated condition, an exceptional high-end collector valuation could be discussed around $52,500. This is a hypothetical premium value for an extraordinary authenticated specimen, not the normal price of a circulated 1958D wheat cent. The actual market price would depend on the exact error, condition, certification, eye appeal, and competition among buyers. That distinction is extremely important for anyone searching old pennies. A normal 1958D Lincoln wheat cent is not automatically worth tens of thousands of dollars. The enormous majority of surviving examples are worth far less. The high valuation in our example depends on the assumption that the coin contains a genuine and scarce mint-made characteristic that specialists would recognize as important. If you own a 1958D wheat cent, examine it carefully before deciding that it is worthless. Look closely at the date, D mint mark, rims, lettering, and both sides of the coin. If you notice unusual doubling, a strange strike, missing metal, or another feature that appears different from ordinary examples, avoid cleaning the coin. Original surfaces are valuable evidence, and polishing or chemical treatment can permanently damage a collectible coin. The 1958D Lincoln cent is fascinating because it combines everyday American history with the ending of a legendary coin design. It may have been produced in enormous numbers, but individual examples can still become interesting when they show unusual production characteristics or exceptional preservation. That is why collectors continue searching old jars, inherited collections, coin albums, and forgotten boxes for these final wheat cents. Next up is the 1917 Abraham Lincoln Wheat 1 cent, a much earlier coin that comes from the first decade of the Lincoln cent series. The example we're looking at today is described as having an erased date, an erased mint mark, and an old, heavily worn appearance. To someone unfamiliar with coin collecting, the missing or damaged details might seem like evidence of rarity. But this is exactly the kind of coin that requires careful examination, because an erased date can be the result of post-mint damage rather than an official mint error. The 1917 Lincoln cent was produced during an important period in American history. The United States was approaching and then entering World War I, and the country was experiencing major changes in industry, transportation, and everyday life. Lincoln cents were already circulating throughout the nation, and the wheat reverse had become a familiar part of American commerce. More than 8 years had passed since the design was introduced, but the Lincoln cent was still a relatively new addition to American coinage. The obverse features Lincoln facing right with "In God We Trust" above the portrait, "Liberty" on the left, and the date 1917 below. Depending on the mint of origin, a small mint mark can appear beneath the date.
Philadelphia coins carry no mint mark, while Denver and San Francisco examples carry D or S. Because the example we're discussing has an erased mint mark, determining what was originally present may be difficult unless enough evidence remains on the surface. The reverse displays the familiar wheat cent design with 2 wheat stalks surrounding 1 cent and United States of America. The motto E pluribus unum appears above. This reverse design was created to give the new Lincoln cent a distinctly American appearance, while also connecting the coin with the country's agricultural heritage. It would remain in use until the final wheat cents were struck in 1958. The 1917 Lincoln cent was produced in substantial numbers across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. Philadelphia produced the largest quantity, while the Denver and San Francisco issues had significantly smaller mintages. Because the mint mark can be extremely important in identifying the exact issue, an erased mint mark can make the coin much more difficult to attribute. That is why the condition described as an erased date deserves special attention. If someone physically removed or rubbed away part of the date after the coin was struck, that is considered post-mint damage rather than a mint error. A genuine mint error involving the date would have to originate during production, such as a die problem or striking issue that affected the design. An erased date caused by a tool, chemical treatment, heavy abrasion, or intentional alteration generally does not increase the value of an otherwise common coin. However, collectors still examine damaged coins carefully because sometimes what looks like an erased feature may actually be the result of severe circulation, corrosion, or a legitimate mint-made characteristic. The key is determining what happened to the coin and when it happened. The same principle applies to the erased mint mark. If a mint mark was physically removed after the coin left the mint, it would not normally make the coin more valuable. In fact, alteration usually reduces collector appeal. But if specialists can identify remnants of the original mint mark and determine the coin's exact production characteristics, the piece may still have some historical interest. The old appearance of the coin also adds to its story. After more than a century, a 1917 cent can show significant wear. Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and clothing may be heavily softened, while the wheat stalks and lettering on the reverse can become difficult to read. Environmental exposure can darken the copper surface, while improper storage can create corrosion or discoloration. Collectors generally prefer coins with original, stable surfaces, even when those surfaces are brown from age. A naturally toned old copper coin can still be attractive, while a coin that has been aggressively cleaned or altered can lose considerable collector appeal. This is why an apparently ugly coin should never be polished simply to make it look newer. The market for 1917 Lincoln cents depends heavily on the exact mint, condition, variety, and originality. A common circulated example without an important variety may be relatively affordable. Higher-grade pieces and scarce mint-marked examples can command much stronger prices. Recognized errors and major varieties can also attract specialists who are willing to pay premiums for unusual pieces. For the particular 1917 example described here, the erased date and erased mint mark would need to be authenticated carefully before any major value could be considered. If the features are simply post-mint damage, the coin would not realistically command a huge auction price. But if professional examination revealed that the unusual appearance actually resulted from a rare mint-made error, the situation could be completely different. For an exceptional hypothetical scenario in which the coin is professionally authenticated as a significant and extremely unusual mint-made error, a high-end collector valuation could be discussed around $57,500. This figure is deliberately different from the first coin and represents an extraordinary error specimen rather than an ordinary 1917 circulated cent. The actual value would depend on the precise error, surviving design details, mint identification, certification, rarity, and collector demand. This is also why collectors should be cautious when they see descriptions such as erased date error. The word error can make a coin sound much more valuable, but not every damaged date represents a mint error. A true error must be connected to the manufacturing process. If the date was removed after the coin was struck, the market generally considers it damage or alteration. Still, even a damaged 1917 Lincoln cent can be an interesting piece of history. Think about how long this coin has survived. It may have traveled through stores, banks, farms, factories, and homes more than a century ago. It could have been handled by people who lived through World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, and decades of American change. That history is part of what makes old wheat cents so fascinating. If you have a 1917 Lincoln cent with a weak or apparently erased date, do not immediately throw it away. Examine it under magnification and look carefully around the date area for remaining design details. Check beneath the date for evidence of a mint mark, but remember that a missing mint mark on a Philadelphia coin is completely